Hi, this is Liz, and welcome to my podcast, Spiritually Speaking with Liz. Just to remind you to click the like and subscribe button and tinkle the little notification bell up there at the top, and on the podcast if you follow on your favourite podcast app. Well, I've got a treat for you today. I have got the fabulous Becky Walsh. I'm going to read her bio because it's very diverse. So Becky is a comedian bringing her humour to subjects of personal development, mental health, and is a UK leading expert on intuition. Becky presented an Agony Aunt-style phone-in radio show on LBC Radio, and she's the author of 4 self-help books, including You Do Know, Learn to Act on Intuition Instantly, which was published in 4 languages by Hay House. She's also the author of Intuitive Lovers, published by O Books, and she presented on BBC Radio for 5 years and had her own TV show, Anything Goes with Becky Walsh. There's no stopping this girl. Becky is a sought-after speaker and has appeared at a world-renowned seminar, the Hay House I Can Do It, as well as being a senior curator, coach and script editor for TEDx Bristol. Becky has a degree in interdisciplinary studies from the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, and she is a qualified life coach. Becky also runs private practice as an intuitive catalyst online. Becky, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. My mother always said that was very polite to say. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. Have a nice cup of tea.
Yeah.
So, Becky, you were a standout person to me, and I'll tell you why. I can remember back in the day reading in the back of Spirit and Destiny magazine where you had a little page about Becky Walsh, where they used to do the about people on the back. And your first piece of advice was, and this has always stuck in my head, it's not about you. And that was, and then reading your little blurb about it said, it's not about you, it's about the other person. So, oh, I don't like that dress you're wearing in the head is a reflection of, well, I wouldn't have picked that. Always about the other person. And I hadn't heard that from anybody before. And to me, that was quite life-changing. So thank you very much for that little
Oh,
nugget.
that's so nice to hear. That's great. I can tell you exactly the situation. I was sitting with a group of girls and well, girls, women, and we were just sitting at bar and stuff. And this woman went past in a red dress, and she just looked absolutely stunning. I mean, she looked like she was poured into it. I don't think she had one of those kind of like, suck it all in, Marks and Spencer's kind of, I don't think she was wearing one of those. She just looked poured into it, and her hair was perfect, her nails were perfect. She was walking in high heels on quite a slippy floor. And we all just kind of like our heads turned, in the ways that guys' heads turn, but it's just all of our heads turned like that. And someone went, "Oh my God, she looks amazing." And everyone else went, "She looks amazing." And she looks amazing. And I came out with a witticism about Betsy's wearing a Marks and Spencer Spanx and everything's just tucked up under her boobs and it's spanked. And I just thought, why am I doing that? And it's because I saw 2 people when I looked at her. I saw her in that dress and I saw me in that dress, and I did not look like she did. And I realised that all of these negative thoughts or anything that kind of like popped into your head is just absolutely never about the other person, but it's about a reflection of yourself. And so then I was like, right, well, the higher self-esteem I've got, the nicer person I'm going to be. And in actual fact, I think Brené Brown talks about this, that the most loving people are the most boundaried. So the more you actually develop your self-esteem, it's not about developing your self-esteem so you're more likable, so people think you're, I mean, that is a byproduct, but it's a byproduct because you don't care so much about trying to get anything from any other human being so you can give more. And so that was the back story to the story.
I like it. Well, and it is something that I repeat a lot. I do repeat a
Cool.
lot. It was one of, one of those real standout bell moments. So thank you for that.
Very well.
So we could talk to Becky for hours about so many things as a multi-talented lady. But the thing that piqued my interest is the intuitive stand-up and how you bring in self-development and comedy together. How does that work, and how did that even start?
Oh gosh, so it started partly because if you go and see a TED talk or anything like that, I kind of started to get to a point, and I was a senior speaker for TEDx Bristol, so I love TED talks, they're great. but quite often there's a trap that people fall into of telling people how to live or how to behave or what they should do or they should eat or what they should think. This is my dog in the background. And I think what ended up happening for me was I just kind of thought it's lecturing, it's patronizing, it's putting down. And then the other thing that happened was when people are kind of like, oh, do you know what? I'm so much about empowering other people. Well, the minute you talk about empowering other people, you're already thinking that they're less than you. And that's not exactly empowering thought to be having. It's a very controlling thought. And so I've always been quite naturally funny. And I used to share a flat with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. And although I wasn't as funny. And so I thought, I wonder how we can actually develop sort of personal development subjects that are actually really interesting to talk to listen to, that make you walk away feeling not only have you learned something, but you've been thoroughly entertained. And also you feel better, so you don't walk away kind of feeling less than, like you sometimes do with the TED Talk. So that was the plan, and then the rest of it was just really about about finding the humor in being a human being, and there's a lot to laugh about.
There is a lot to laugh about. So how would a show work? Do you have sort of in your head a set way it's going to go, and then sort of read the audience and see where you think they might be wanting to go with it?
Yeah, well, it's exactly what you said about, that it's not about you. If I go out there wanting the audience to laugh, then I'm scuppered. That's the worst thing to do ever. So what I tend to do is I have a rough outline of the messages that I want to get across, so the things that I want to say. And then what ends up happening is, as I'm talking to the audience about these particular things, intuitively, you kind of, there'll be somebody who stands out in the audience, and somehow something about them will make you end up telling a story or go off track from what you're actually been talking about. It's usually within the subject. So the show that I'm doing at the moment is called Burnout. And it's all about like the reasons why we become burnt out, and very much what's going on in the world at the moment with this idea of, we've changed from saying how are you, and we say busy. I'm busy. And just bizarrely, and it's kind of, when did busy become like such a cool thing to be doing? I'm just busy, and so I sort of like talk about how I changed the word busy to balanced, and everyone's like, "Are you all right? Balanced." Well, you're normally really busy. So started talking about that, but sometimes you'll be in the middle of talking about something and you can feel that someone's relating to something. So by telling an anecdotal story, usually self-deprecating, about your own life or about a situation, you somehow are actually reflecting something back to that person. You can tell, because you can see light bulb moments coming off. And quite often, because I think an audience is attracted for a reason. And I think that quite often there's commonality within an audience. And you can see light bulb moments going off all over the room where people go, oh my God, I do that. Oh, that's why I do that. And understanding why you do something means that when you try and do it again as a habit or addiction, you kind of can't. You kind of can't, because you know why you're doing it. So it means that you actually change your behavior, which is kind of cool.
It's pretty, and you must be unique in this. There can't be anybody else doing this, is there?
No, I did some research into comedians that do personal development or spiritual kind of like teaching within it. I mean, obviously we know Russell Brand because he's gone from comedy into that. And then there's also another guy called Kyle Cease in the US, but he's gone more down. He's become, I don't want to be rude, but he's become less funny and definitely more about, he does a kind of like a Tony Robbins style of thing where he is also, he adds in a bit of humor, but he gets people up on stage, and I'm a little bit more uncomfortable with that. So I'm actually developing what I'm doing into being more stand up. So the other day on Saturday, I went and did 10 minutes worth of stand up from Burnout about busyness at a night with other comedians. Every single person in that audience had come for a comedy night. That's great. But then when I'm talking about how busy has become the new thing instead of saying, how are you? And started analysing about busy and where it comes from and why we're like that, and why busy comes with props like a coffee and a laptop, even though everything's on your phone. Why do you need the laptop? But all of this stuff kind of comes with this idea that in order to be busy, I'm looking like I'm successful. But in actual fact, what you're doing is you're heading towards burnout. And, you know, not necessarily, but how to like look at what is going on and why you need to be busy and what your identity is around busyness. Because busy is now, as far as I'm concerned, an archetype. So, you know, where we have like an inner teacher or a coach or an inner child or anything like that, we now have an archetype just called busy. You know, it's just busy. It's like, oh, who are you? Busy? Yeah, okay. Archetype, isn't it? It's like, it's
no,
big.
it is. It is.
Yeah.
I think it's quite an ego thing, isn't it? That you need to be busy to be
Oh, yeah.
seen as important, to be seen as being anything good. Oh yeah, oh so busy.
So busy, very important, hugely important, massive. I'm massive, in fact. And of course, what ends up happening is we are addicted to the chemicals created by busyness. So things like cortisol is a really great chemical. So if you've ever woken up and gone, nah, go back to sleep, that's because your cortisol hasn't clicked in. And because what happens within the 10 minutes of snoozing? Nothing. But within 5-10 minutes, even 2 minutes of snoozing, you suddenly are ready to get out of bed. And it's because cortisol kicks in within those within first half an hour to 45 minutes of waking up, which gives you the motivation to get out of bed and get busy. If you're the kind of person who will have a coffee in that time, actually it can dampen how your cortisol works. But we are addicted to cortisol because it's a stress hormone. It gives us that invigoration. So it's a little bit like taking speed in some ways. And dopamine is addictive. And the oxytocin of being told, thank you, well done, I don't know what I'd do without you, you know, thanks for that job or whatever it is. These are all neuropathways that fire. And of course, what happens is when you have exhausted all of your chemicals because you've been at it, and you haven't given yourself any downtime, that's when you hit burnout. And literally everything turns off. You know, if you've ever had that feeling like you go into the living room and go, what did I get here for? Can't remember. It's like that all the time. What am I
It's
like?
my life.
It's like,
I thought that was menopause.
I really think that there's a lot to do with menopause and this because, of course, you know, your estrogen's dropping, but also your testosterone is rising. And what happens when testosterone rises, a lot of people then go off and start businesses and do incredible entrepreneurial things. So we hear a lot about, you know, menopause being this really terrible thing. You become prune-like and don't want sex. But in actual fact, there is so many other positive benefits that come with it. But it is very linked to burnout. You know, they say that premenstrual symptoms is all the things that you repress saying, you know, all the patriarchy stuff you repress saying all month, you know, all the stuff you rolled your eyes at. I went, oh, fine, I cannot be bothered to get into an argument about this. I'll just take it on the chin again. And that menopause is your whole life.
It's coming
every
out.
time you did that is unresolved, that you suddenly look into your little bag of F's, you know, and go, nothing left. It's like, and then you've got testosterone, so you're really happy to get into these arguments and stuff that you were trying to avoid your entire life. Yeah.
Oh, so true. So back to Saturday night and the comedy. So
Yeah.
how was it received? So people are out for a drink, they're seeing all these different comedians, and then you come on for 10 minutes. How are you received in the environment of, shall we say, main stage comedy?
Yeah, I mean, well, as a woman, it's always a thing where people take a few minutes to decide if you're funny. Once they've decided, because when they're in the decision-making brain, they don't laugh. And if you panic at that point, because they're like, oh, really? Come on then, let's see what you got. So you have to kind of wait for that to get over because there's a lot more judgment, mainly from women towards other women, which is just unfortunate, but it's the way it is. And once they've decided that you're funny, then you're off. And it's really about what you do within those first couple of minutes, because if you do something in those first couple of minutes that can get your audience on side, I call it the saving the cat moment. There's a really good book about film script writing, and it talks about no matter how evil the character is, if they've done something nice within the first kind of 10 minutes of the film, like saved a cat, you'll forgive them everything. And pretty much within the first kind of like few minutes of being on stage, especially if you've only got 10 minutes, you have to show vulnerability. So there has to be something that you do, and it can be either self-deprecating or even something physical. Like if you're wearing shoes, you make sure that people realize that the shoes are uncomfortable. And it's just a subtle thing that people kind of go, oh, that person's human. And then you've got the audience on side. They're not scrutinizing you anymore because you're one of them.
Okay.
And then you can go wherever you want because you've got permission. So it goes down really well because people don't realize when you're slipping in the information about cortisol or you're slipping in the other bits. And sometimes if I've gone too far and I realize I've gone too much into the education rather than the stand-up, and because they're used to set up, line, punchline, set up, punchline. And you're not quite delivering that. If you're going set up, learning bit, set up,
yeah,
it can go on too long and then line. They'll laugh at the line, but if you know that you've lost them before the line, you just kind of say something like, you're not interested in this at all, are you? And with the line, but you've still managed to say what it is that you wanted to say. I'm actually interested. And they go, no. Oh, I'll go, this is a female thing. You just talk among yourself, or something like that. And then that actually creates the line. So it's kind of, sounds like I've given this a lot of thought. I think I'm giving it half the thought I'm telling you about.
It sounds very complicated.
I know, but when you're up there, it's not, and it's quite fast. Like, and also you're reacting to what's going on in the room. So on Saturday, I'd gone on about this thing about how the people I hate the most are the people who say that they're busy but they're really not, and they spend forever telling you that they're busy. So I'm like, oh, I'm just so busy, and you just want to kill them because when you are busy, anyone talking slowly is really annoying. And then I went off on one about the fact that these people also have painted nails. And go, how do they have time to get the nails painted? And I don't know where that came from either, but because I've never been very annoyed about people painting their nails. And so I went into this one, and then this girl dropped her drink, and I just turned around and because it distracted the entire audience, and I said, that's because you're relating to this, aren't you? And she laughed and went, yeah. And then her boyfriend went, and she's got painted nails. So just things like that are the jewels, if you can kind of get those things that you just, they're the moments that you really like. They're really good when there's something actually happening in the audience that you can riff off.
Absolutely. And how do the other comedians respond to this sort of innovative way?
So I used to do this in Bristol with a group of women called What the Frock, and I did it much more about, there was a lot more teaching going into it, and it didn't work. It didn't work with them. It didn't work with what they were doing, so I stopped doing it. But this is a weird thing about comedians, that whenever I do like stand-up gigs with other comedians, so weird. Nobody compliments each other. Nobody says, well done. Nobody talks.
Wow.
It's the weirdest thing. You would think that there was some kind of camaraderie, and there just isn't. And I've analysed this, and I don't know whether or not this is because the majority of the people on stage are a lot younger than me. They're in their 20s. And this could just be something where, whatever generation I am, X, I don't know, where we're used to being very supportive. I think maybe if I'd have grown up with screens and things being liked as a button instead of it being a verbal compliment, I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day. But yeah, I have noticed the difference. Either that, or I'm just a really intimidating 50-year-old woman, and they think they're going to get into trouble with their mum. That might also be it. I don't know.
I don't think you're intimidating, love, at all. Oh,
my God, I don't know.
That's a really interesting point that you've said there, and I've never thought about that, about the likes. Now it's a click on a screen, where for us it was a verbal thing.
There is so much that's different. When I go and teach, I teach emotional resilience for students in media, and I can't make them laugh. I cannot make them laugh. Like there's an entire auditorium, because they're not there to laugh, they're there to learn. But literally, they look at me like I'm on Zoom, and I can't get a reaction from them at all. And it's just weird. This isn't sort of saying that this might just be the university I'm going to, but I think I'm really witnessing a really big change in social interaction from people who are younger. I've just come back from Japan, and while I was traveling, I'm the kind of traveler I love talking to strangers. That's why I go traveling, especially on my own. But I met a group of girls who were from England, who were, you know, in their 20s, and I went, "Oh, you're from England? Where are you from?" And they went, and I'm like, "I am talking to you," and they looked at each other for reassurance. And then
Oh.
one of them, who was from the north, she went, "Newcastle," and I was like, "Oh, you're like, used to live in Darlington, chat, 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 chat." And they literally were like, and I just was like, "Oh, okay, well, bye then."
Isn't it funny?
It's really weird, really, really weird. So this might be the next rabbit hole I go down on, which is like, why has this happened? And actually, is it related to COVID? Because people have been locked down for a couple of years.
Yeah.
It could be a number of different things. So I don't know whether or not I should really necessarily be jumping to the social media aspect and everything being on screens. It could literally be the fact that informative time period, that social interaction just hasn't been there because we've all been wearing masks. We haven't
Yeah.
been talking to each other. We've been keeping a distance from each other. And although we think it's been 2 years, it's probably been about 3.
Mm-hmm.
3 years when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s is very different to 3 years when you're a teenager,
Yes, it
because
is.
your brain is forming at that point, you know. So you know, up until the age of about 21, your brain isn't really completely fully formed. So what has that done to the brain when you're looking for social interactions, when you're looking for feedback as do I fit in, am I accepted? I don't know. I mean, how?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
I
really
never
weird.
I never thought about. I'm presuming this is how you got into all this. It's how you're very intrigued by how we tick, aren't you?
God, totally fascinated. You know, I think I sometimes feel like I'm more like Doctor Who, that's sort of like, you know, analysing two hearts, but like analysing human beings. But I've always been like that. I've just even as a kid, I've just always been like that. And I think it's highly curious, highly intuitive. And I don't know if the intuition has actually come from the fact that I'm so curious about people. So I don't know. I'm fascinated with how the brain works. The brain's just amazing. Yeah. And then,
It,
of course, that leads into the meaning of life and why are we here and all of the big questions. Yeah. I
so,
decided I don't care, by the way, about
all
all of
right.
that. Yeah, I've decided to live in the mystery because I drove myself mad. So I've decided to live in the mystery. So I'm
I
no
like
longer
that.
seeking
I'll join you in the mystery.
yeah,
Yeah, I
I'm
think
just
that
no
sounds.
longer seeking answers. It's none of my business.
But it isn't, is it? And that's what's the funny. That's the funny thing. So, how did you end up studying in San Francisco?
So I'd got to a point, so I became a really well-known intuitive. I was even called a brazen cow by Darren Brown. It was excellent. I had my own, it was just, yes, God, isn't he good?
Lovely.
It's great, isn't he? How did you pick that up intuitively? So yeah, I think what had happened was I'd got a radio show on LBC, I'd got book deals, everything was going incredibly well, and a lot of what was the stereotype around the work I was doing at the time I didn't believe in, and I I refused the spirit works in mysterious ways. I refuse that. No, there is reasons behind everything. I just need to find them. So I guess I burnt out. I guess I kind of went, I don't know what else to do. I've burnt out. I can't keep fighting the cause or the argument when I don't feel like I actually have enough evidence to talk about the things that I believe in. And so I jacked everything in. I had a dog at the time. I took the dog, moved to San Francisco to be a student to study everything I could on neuroscience, mainly because I wanted to understand how people who have a really high level of intuition and other people don't. And what I discovered is it's a form of neurodiversity. And at the time I was looking into this, there wasn't really that much talk about neurodiversity. You might kind of say, oh, somebody's autistic or they're dyslexic or they're, you know, or and can be both. But there wasn't really the ADHD and and spectrums of.
Mm-hmm.
And what I discovered from my research is that a lot of people that had a really high level of intuition were also considered to be dyslexic. So I was like, well, hang on a minute. How come, you know, with something like autism, you can kind of say, oh, this person's incredible remembering dates, numbers, maths, all of this stuff, like, Rain Man being a typical stereotype of that. And yet if somebody can read people, oh, well, they're fake and a liar. Really? Well, how does that work exactly? So how can I, because something that you can, that people say you can't evidence it. Actually, there's a heck of a lot of evidence. There's a heck of a lot of evidence. So I think really a high level of intuition is a form of neurodiversity. And I think as we continue to study it, that's why I wrote the book, You Do Know Learning to Act on Intuition Instantly, was to make that shift. And in actual fact, I think the shift was made. And Kindred Spirit magazine talked about me as being a pioneer of the shift from what people talked about as occult, psychic. It went from occult in the bookshop to mind, body, spirit, to mind, body, soul, and now it's well-being.
Yeah.
Because spirituality comes under well-being.
Yes.
And the fact that I can listen to Chris Evans interviewing Deepak Chopra or anyone, any spiritual speaker, and the way that they're talked about now without that level of woo-woo. I was part of that movement to get this into the mainstream media so that spirituality isn't just a cog in a wheel, but I was part of that chain reaction to actually get it to where it is now, which is fabulous. And I think it's done a lot of good for people to actually be able to understand that they're not so much more than a physical being, that that you have a brain in your head and a brain in your heart and your gut. It's got neurons, it's all joined together by the vagus nerve. It communicates with the right hemisphere of the brain rather than the left, because the left is usually busy. All of that like stuff. And that's also why I do the show Busy, is trying to get people out of the busy left hemisphere and into the right hemisphere, into the seat of intuition, creativity, ideas, curiosity. And by poking light-hearted fun at our addictions, we dishevel them. And that's why I do the show.
Yeah, it's a genius way of doing it, because it's light-hearted, but there's a real depth to it, isn't there? There's a real learning that can take place just from a night out having a good time, rather than
sorry interrupting, but
you go on.
The audience stay, they don't leave, they stay and hang out and talk to each other, and that's
amazing. That is amazing,
really amazing. Because if we've had some interaction, then sometimes someone will turn around and go, I did that. I did this really fun reverse psychology, and this guy put up his hand and he said, I want to be a better dad. And the whole audience went, ooh. And I went, no, you don't. How am I supposed to earn a living if you're going to be a better dad? Because your future children will book appointments with me. And I just made this entire kind of funny thing up. And then at the end, I said, so what's going on? Why do you want to be a better dad? And he said, I've got twins, and they ran away today, and we're heading towards the main road, and I was running after them, and I managed to catch them just before they ran out onto the main road. The entire audience coached this guy. Oh, you think that's bad? Well, there was a time when I locked mine in the microwave. It's like, and it was just beautiful. I kind of stood back and watched it happen. Then afterwards, they were swapping numbers with him. They were talking. It was just lovely.
That is really, what an really achievement. Cool. To create that space that people can be vulnerable, communicate, support one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is that thing that people suddenly go, a couple of friends were like, we thought we knew each other, but actually from tonight, these conversations we've had afterwards, I didn't realise that this person was feeling like this about that. So it just it enters into that. It just enters into a conversation that is more difficult to enter into unless there's something abstract outside of ourselves to talk about. So we can talk about what she said and then relate it to our own lives. But it might be very difficult to find the words to actually express how it is that we feel. But if somebody else can express it for us, and then we can go, and it's like that, it's just like that for me, then it just enters it into a different way of being able to talk about those subjects.
Yeah, that's amazing. That really is amazing. And it must be very fulfilling, that.
Bloody love it. I just love it. I absolutely love it. So this show is kind of like all about burnout, but the next show is called Toss Bag, how to deal with challenging people. Because the other thing I'm seeing a massive rise of within my clients is bullying in the workplace.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and our resilience around bullying in the workplace is in question. I know this sounds a little bit weird, because we don't want to be judgmental and we don't want to think hateful things about other people. But sometimes it is actually really good for your mental health to have a name that you call someone who's an absolute toss bag at work. So by having a name, so there was somebody who I used to have to work with who was really difficult, and I used to call them Snaggletooth. They didn't have snaggly teeth at all, but it was just the fact that they were archaic in their. So I'd go into work and go, "How about this?" And they go, "It's not going to do it." And so Snaggletooth was a dinosaur, and and it just meant, right, that whenever I was getting frustrated or upset or felt victimized, the word Snaggletooth made me giggle, which meant that all of the it's not fair was dissipated, because I'm just going, oh, it's just who she is, rather than because it just, I can't change somebody, but
No.
I need to learn how to deal with them. And one of the ways in which we can deal with them is actually by making up names about them. It's actually
Yeah.
a very positive thing to do, unless you tell them.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
Don't tell them. And also it ruins the secret if you tell them.
Yeah, it's not got yeah, it's not going to have the same gravitas, is it? If it's, yeah, if you've told them. On a gear shift, then, let me ask you, you were one of the main speakers on the I Can Do It, the Hay House summit tours that they do. Tell me about that. What was that like?
Oh, just great. It was, I'd gone to a lot of I Can Do It conferences, and I'd been like, it's like the Wayne's World moment. One day I will be on that stage, and so when they asked me to do it, I was really excited, and I had like a really amazing lineup of other speakers as well. And so yeah, just to be in that lineup with those kinds of names, the people whose books you've been reading for ages, and then suddenly you're backstage with them, it's a little bit kind of starstruck and a little bit kind of overwhelmed. So that was really nice, and it was a really great thing to do. And I added in a bit of humour with doing that too. And then of course COVID happened, and they stopped doing so much of these events. But I did do a sneaky thing. So because I've got a background in journalism, I said, would it be okay if I interviewed? So for a couple of years running, I interviewed the I Can Do It speakers. So I got to meet people like Dr. Joe Dispenza, and just
Oh,
all of these
wow.
people I think are
Yeah.
really amazing, and kind of just put them on a nice sofa, 2 camera shoot, absolutely fine. And then what I did was I put myself on the same sofa talking to a brush and answered all of my own questions, and made a film with all of these big name speakers and me, Muggins here, in the same lineup, because I'm in charge of the editing. So before I'd become like a international best-selling author, there I am sitting on a sofa with international best-selling authors, one after the other. And so instead of editing them in as individual pieces, I edited them as I'd ask all of the speakers the same question, and then put their answers together, and then put my answer in with it.
Why not?
Well, exactly, why not? So somebody, would kind of like go, gosh, she's an international speaker, best author, the likes of Joe Dispenza, that woman. Yeah,
He's mind blowing, that guy, isn't he?
he is mind blowing. He is. And then someone else I really like as well, Dr. David Hamilton. He's absolutely
Mm-hmm.
brilliant as well. He's really good, and Dr. Bruce Lipton,
Mm-hmm.
and But it's a shame. I tell you what kills me is, who is the leading spiritual thought leader coming out of the UK that is female? Kills me.
Mm.
We need one.
We
I remember having this conversation.
do. It's you.
Yeah, well, I know. Robert Holden said the same thing. He said it's you, and I was like, and I actually got into. I have gone in and sort of said, look, women in the UK do not support other women, and the predominance of people who buy these books, buy tickets, go to these events, they go and see the men, but they don't go and see the women. They don't support the women. And one of the things that did happen at the I Can Do It conference, when I'm sitting there as a nobody before I'd gone on stage, I was in the auditorium. I went to the bathroom, and there's usually a really, really long queue to the loo,
Mm.
always. And I went to the bathroom, and I'm listening to the conversation through the cubicles. Oh my God, wasn't he brilliant? Oh, it was great. I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And then they talked about one of the female speakers and went, didn't like her shoes. Why was she wearing a pair of shoes like that? I went, it's back to that toilet moment and the woman in the red dress.
Wow.
And unless we can actually break that, then there isn't going to be a leading female speaker coming out of the UK. And I think that people can kind of go, oh, I've been told so many times, you're manifesting your own block, or you're manifesting that. No, it's an actual reality
No, it
that
is.
there really isn't that pathway for women, and there really should be. And it's easier in the States. I lived in America for a couple of years. They have a sisterhood, and it isn't like that, whereas it really is like that here. And I think that we do ourselves a disservice. I really do. And I can honestly wax lyrical about this, but I will stop at this point.
I agree. I think there are more movements rising, shall we say, of women getting together in groups, women's circles, that kind of thing. So hopefully there's a shift. But yeah, you are absolutely spot on. It is true. It is true that, and it's even down to like reality shows or whatever. It's never the women, is it? It's always the guys.
Yeah. And it's really, disheartening, because I kind of
Mm.
thought at some point there would be someone, that we would have our own kind of like, I mean, I can list them that are American. I
Mm.
can even list some Australian ones. And actually the ones that do well over here are usually not people who were born here, but born somewhere else. So
Yeah.
they haven't grown up with the same British hang-ups that of the, north of England, don't make yourself out to be more than what you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
they don't have the same thing. So I was at a conference, and I've forgotten her name. She did the uh, what doctors don't tell you. I can see her face, but yeah, she's
Uh,
Scottish,
mm.
and
Gillian
uh,
McKeith.
yeah, that's the one. No, not that one. Anyway, oh,
No,
ah,
she's the yeah.
yeah. Oh, but yes, it's a very close name. Anyway, never mind. It's not going to come back. Menopause moment. And we were talking. I mentioned this, and she said, "Oh well, I've never had a problem." And I said, "With all due respect, you base yourself in the States." And she went, "Oh yeah." So it's not, But anyway, there's no point moaning about it. I just actually can't be really bothered to do anything about it. I can't be bothered because it just sounds like victimhood. I just think I just need to crack on with what I do,
Yeah.
and everyone needs to crack on with what they do. And if the world turns around, then fabulous. But if it doesn't, there you go. Doesn't matter.
I think it's starting to shift, but I think it's got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think you're right. Definitely right.
So, in an ideal world, where would you like to take all this? Where would you like to take the comedy shows? What would you like to do?
I would love to be taking them on a world tour, and I'd love to be taking them onto cruise ships.
Yeah.
I used to work on cruise ships, and
Did you?
yeah, I did, yeah, as a stage manager and lighting technician, and I loved ship life, I really did, and so I would like to go on for shorter bouts that involve my own cabin, and I'd really, really like to be taking these shows on cruise ships. I'd really like to be taking them on world tours. I would love to be like packing out like really big venues, like 500 seat, well, say really big 500-seater venues, because you can lose the intimacy, but I would love to be doing that. I think that that'd be great. Yeah,
Keep it there.
yeah,
Right.
that'd
I
be
would
great.
like to ask you, before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you, as Becky Walsh now in her 50th,
Mhm.
going back to maybe teenage Becky or 20s Becky, what three pieces of advice would you give to that younger version of you, knowing what you know now?
I would definitely go back to that point of it's not about you. So,
Mm.
nothing anyone is thinking is about you. It's always about them. I think, and therefore also it's the same thing. Ironically, if someone's in love with you, it's also not about you. So that's really alarming, isn't it? But
Yeah.
it's about if someone's in love with you, it's about how you make them feel.
Yeah.
It's not about you, it's about how you make them feel. It's about whether or not they feel good in your company. And I think I spent so long trying to make myself the most fabulous person so that people would love me. That doesn't work. What works is that when you make someone feel that they're the most fabulous person, that's when they love you, because they love how they feel about themselves in your company. So I would go back and tell my younger self to just like lay it. It's fine. Don't even worry about it, because it's about how you'll make other people feel in the future that will create the amount of love that you have in your life. So I'd say that. So it's not about you, and the caveat of that. I would say keep up the travelling, because the day you can't travel because of a pandemic, well, you'll be really glad that you did.
Yes. Yeah.
Really glad that you did. And so, yeah, I think that, travel, see the world, see different perspectives, because you can get really stuck into small-minded thinking. So that, and I think that the last one would be about loneliness, actually. I think it's something we don't really talk about an awful lot, and we have the idea that loneliness is about, particular people. But I would say that the more you learn, the more you know, the more diversely you think, or the more information you consume, the less you relate to people and the less people relate to you. So I would say find pleasure in your small connections, and don't look for people that can fulfill all of the different dynamics of you, but make sure that you've got lots of friends who reflect back to you the little parts of yourself. Otherwise, you'll end up feeling very, lonely, alone, but also disconnected.
Mm-hmm. Very sage advice. On that note, as we're finishing, where could people find you? So you're in Weston-super-Mare, aren't you?
I am.
So obviously, people can work with you one-to-one online, but where could people catch your busy?
Yes, so I've got Burnout is on at Weston-super-Mare. It's actually on Friday this week. It's totally sold out, which is amazing. I love a sold out show.
Well done.
We're coming back into Weston-super-Mare because the last two shows in Weston sold out, and people are like, oh. So I'm doing it for an animal charity called Paws and Claws. So that's going to be in July at the stables. So we're not ticketing it. We're just like first come, first served, biggest donation wins. So we're not going to work it like that. And then I'm going to be at the Alma Tavern in Bristol. So that's going to be in July as well. So tickets aren't on sale yet. So if you know that they sell out, get those. And then the easiest way to find out the entire listing of everything I'm doing is on beckywalsh.com. So all W's, beckywalsh.com.
Okay, and I shall list that below. Becky, thank you so much for joining me. You've been a breath of fresh air. I've loved every moment. And thank you guys for joining us, and I'll see you next week. Bye.